Hello, and welcome to Navigating Nursing. I am your host, Laura Whitehead, a registered adult nurse, a critical care nurse, qualified lecturer, and fellow of the Higher Education Academy. I'm joined today by Lucy Burt, who is a ward manager at a Marie Curie hospice. Hello, Lucy, and thank you so much for joining me today. Did you know that you always wanted to be a nurse?
I went through a few different options when I was younger, but to be honest, I had a bit of a moment when I was 15. My mum went into hospital for a double mastectomy. She had breast cancer. I remember I was visiting her and I sat opposite from this woman who was trying to eat her tea at dinner, whatever you whatever you call it. I remember they would just kind of plonk the plate in front of her and I could see her struggling to eat it and like to get to it. So I went over to help her and then I just really thought about it and I thought, you know what, that made me feel quite nice. And I remember my mum having two Macmillan nurses. And at the time I was so young and I found it really difficult to like deal with the fact that my mum had cancer. And I thought they were absolutely fantastic. And I just thought, you know what, I'm gonna give that a go. And that was when I was like 15. And then here I am 15 years later, haven't looked back.
So you went to Sheffield Hallam University. Why did you choose that university?
I definitely wanted to move away. So you had like a list on there, and I remember I got into a couple. Thought Sheffield, it's not too far away. It's about 2.5 hours from Newcastle. And actually, when I went for my interview, because when I went for this one, me and my mum went. We got on the bus from the city centre to the campus because it wasn't in the city centre, and it was around school time, and all the school kids were getting on. It was heaving. One of the kids obviously got on and spoke to the bus driver and said to the bus driver that it was one of their mates' birthdays. So the bus driver started singing happy birthday, and then the
Now that would
whole
not
bus,
happen in London.
no, it would not, absolutely no way. And the whole bus started singing happy birthday, and I just thought, you know what, this is the place for me. They seem really canny. Um, so I just thought, and obviously the uni was like really impressive. Like I went to look around, they had like a really good like simulation center and generally like a really lovely city and still a bit northern. So I was happy with that.
Got to have a bit of northernness in there.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
So, when you qualified, you worked as a healthcare assistant for 2 months. Was that while you were waiting your PIN to come through, or was that a job issue?
So when I qualified, so I qualified in 2011, there just wasn't any jobs. There just wasn't as many. There just was a real delay. So when I initially applied, it was actually for a temporary part-time contract. It was like 18 hours or something like that, and that was all that they could offer us.
Wow.
So I kind of, you can imagine I was a bit gutted,
I bet that
like
was so
doing,
stressful. Because also one of
yeah,
the
like
things that we do nursing for is, you'll always have a job, you'll always be able to pay your rent, you'll always be able to have a mortgage. Like it's seen as a very safe route to go down, isn't
absolutely.
it?
Yeah, absolutely. And then the thought of I'm only going to be on 18 hours or something, and then I'm going to have to probably do a load of bank to make up the money because I was renting, of course. It was just a bit stressful. So what I kind of thought was what I'll do for 2 months is just do loads of bank as a healthcare, try and get some money. It was just a bit of a waiting game. A couple of months later, I started.
So your first job ended up being in cardiology. Was that a specialty that you were interested in? Had you ever worked on a placement there?
No, I did a lot of my placement in care of the elderly, and I remember at the time I thought I feel like I've drawn the short straw here slightly because all of my other friends had really sexy placements, A&E and
A&E,
stuff like
ITU.
exactly, really, really like hands-on, gory stuff, and I was there in care of the elderly. And you know what? I am so grateful because I feel like it's proper made us learn how to care for people really, really well. It's such a mixed bag. So yeah, I kind of you apply to a pool. So I was kind of thinking, right, I'm really prepared to get a care of the elderly or a stroke or something like a ward like that, a really heavy one. And that's what I kind of wanted. I got this elective cardiology that wasn't open on weekends, and I thought, oh wow, it was a real good stepping stone to where I went to next in ITU. A really lovely first job to ease us into my career that I'll probably be in until I'm like 70.
Oh, at least. I think we're going to be 75. I'm going to get one of those
Yeah,
Zimmers with a little tray on and I can put the meds on it
absolutely.
and then I'll just shuffle. But I think you've raised something really good and that's something I think that actually, your first job, the speciality doesn't necessarily, just because it's not a speciality that you saw yourself going into or you see your career going, actually having a really supportive team is the most important thing. So you
Hmm.
moved to intensive care at St Thomas's, you moved to London. What
I
made you
did.
choose to come all the way down south?
Well, this I always tell the story and it sounds a bit silly, but pretty much at the time I was gonna move out of Sheffield. I had been there for 5 years and it was gonna be to move to Manchester or London. And I wasn't really sure about London, to be fair, because I thought, oh my God, it's too big. I had made the decision that I was gonna go. And then I had a dream. Sounds ridiculous, but I had a dream and I woke up the next morning, and the dream was that I was trying to get over a bridge and I couldn't get over it. And I'm not into, well, I kind of read into dreams occasionally, but not hugely. And I thought, you know what, that means something. So I had a day off that day, and I applied for a job in ITU, Guys and St Thomas's, and it was a transitional course, so ideal for someone that kind of wants to get into ITU. I applied for that job and only that job, went for the interview, got the job. 3 months later, I moved to London.
Wow.
So it was just really, it was crazy and it was exciting. It was fantastic. It was something that I had thought about doing before in terms of intensive care. Like that wasn't just plucked out the air like London and the bridge and stuff was.
Part of it was a plan.
Yes, so because I wanted some real acute experience, because I kind of thought at some point in my career I would maybe like to travel and work abroad, and a lot of that is, it would be really helpful if you had ITU or A&E experience and things. So that's why I went for the ITU, and obviously it was perfect, the fact that it was a transition course as well.
Mentioned it being a transition course, a transition post. What does that mean?
It was a group of us that started together, and they do it in like intakes. And what we did was that you go to uni for regular study days, um, and it was through King's College, London. Um, so you did loads of courses, and then you had like a clinical nurse educator who would come and check on you, make sure you were okay, quite regularly. You would have a couple of buddies who would, and like mentor type things, that would sign you off for loads of competencies. So yeah, it was really, really thorough, intense, of course, because of the area, and very, very overwhelming, especially coming from working in Sheffield to then working in a central London hospital in Guys and St Thomas's, where there was like hundreds of nurses. But yeah, the transition course was fantastic. It was a real good opportunity, and it's a
Really
good
good
way because
idea.
it's such a fantastic idea, because then you're together with a group, so it's not as daunting. Like you've got a little team to kind of fall back on and bounce ideas off. And
You then went to work in oncology at Guy's Hospital. Was that a speciality that you were, you saying from your mum and kind of the experience with them at Midland, was that something in the back of your mind that you were always going to end up doing?
so I only did a year in intensive care, and that was purely because I learned so much. I probably learned more in that year than I did in my 3 years at uni, because it's just so intense. But I just thought it's too big. I feel like maybe I would have got on better if it had been a small intensive care. So I thought, you know what, this is probably not for me. I'm gonna move on. And at this point, you're getting a bit worried, because you think, God, I've been qualified, 2.5 years. I'm now moving on to my third job. How's that going to look? I
That's
just
something
thought,
that I did A&E for 9 months. I'd been qualified a year and then moved to A&E, and I was really worried. What will this look like? And I think if you realise an area isn't for you, or for whatever reason, that you do move on if that's what you decide, and that you don't have to stay for kind of a set number of
mhm,
years or a set amount of time, because actually all of you is still the same job. You're still a nurse, whether you're
yeah.
in intensive care at St Thomas's, or wherever you move on to oncology at Guy's, you're still on that same path, aren't you?
Even when I've interviewed people, unless they were changing like every 2 or 3 months, then otherwise I would look at their CV and go, what a wealth of experience they've got, in all these different areas. And you've got to take the opportunities when they come, haven't you? You've just got to
Yeah.
jump. And that's the beauty of nursing. I remember when I qualified, speaking to somebody, and they were saying, oh my God, like it's such a fantastic career. It's so portable. You can go wherever you want, you can do whatever you want, and you can get so many different experiences. So do it. You might as well make the most of it. And you do that by changing your job and experiencing new things. And you've got to try new things to make you realize if you like them or not. There's no such thing as like a bad experience in terms of changing around in jobs and stuff, because you can learn from everything, I think. So yeah, back to the question in hand. I moved from ITU to oncology because I had made that decision, of course. And then just thought to myself, you know what? I came into nursing because I wanted to work with patients who had cancer and then potentially get into Macmillan nursing. And I thought, I've had a year where it's not something that I feel like I'm probably going to be doing, whereas I know that I want to get into oncology. So let's just go for it. Why am I putting off? And again, that thing, you know, I might go and I might not like it. And then if I wait until I'm like bloody 50 or something, then and think that's my end career, and then I regret it, that'll be really irritating. So I just saw this job come up around the time that I had again made that decision that I was going to go. And it was a guy's hospital in oncology on a ward there, and like best decision I ever made. Honestly, I loved working there. And I think had I not have left London to come back to Newcastle, I probably would have stayed there longer. It was just such a fantastic ward, really busy, really acute. But then you got that fantastic side of the end of life, the palliative care, the real care inside. So you had that, you know, the sexiness that I talked about earlier of the kind of really unwell patients. But then you were really able to care for them and look after them, and the team was amazing. And luckily, whilst I was there, I had opportunity to kind of go up in my band. I also did 3 months secondment as acting ward manager before I left. But I also, in between that time, did a year as a discharge CNS, nurse specialist.
How did you find that?
You know what? I hadn't been a band 6 for long, and I saw the job come up, and it was a band 7 job. I thought, God loves a trier. Come on, I'm going to have a go here. Great decision. It was fantastic. I worked across, I would go and help these patients that we did a lot of fast tracks. So patients that have had conversations with the medical team and time is very short, and you're talking about preferred place of death, which was really interesting to me. And to facilitate that and to make that happen was so exciting, and it just gave me such good job satisfaction. Great experience. But I did it for a year because it was a secondment, and then I went back to the ward.
So you'd worked at oncology at Guy's, and then your next post was in the hospice back home in Newcastle. Did you always know that you wanted to go home at one point, or was it more that the role came up?
So I had made the decision after being in London for 5 years. I just thought I'm gonna go home. I kind of had this overwhelming feeling that I wanted to settle down a little bit and be closer to my family. And I remember I worked with a nurse on the ward at Guy's who had come from a hospice, and I remember her just being a fantastic nurse and just such a lovely temperament and nature. And she used to speak about the hospice, and it would make us kind of, I was quite curious about it. And I thought that it was something that I definitely wanted to try and do. Yeah, I applied for 2 jobs before I moved home, then this one at the hospice. And it was as band 6 ward sister. Yeah, I took it, and it was quite surreal to make that decision to come home and leave this amazing job and kind of family on my ward. And you know what I mean? Because we had such good friends there. But I just knew it was the right thing to do for me to come back and just be around my family and settle down and stuff.
Do you recommend that anyone that wants to do hospice nursing go to an inpatient oncology ward first, or do you think it is possible to just go straight into the hospice?
I think you probably, I think it really helps. I think it does help because the hospice that I work in, it's not just patients with cancer, just a real mixed bag of patients, but the majority of them do have cancer or have had cancer, and so it is quite helpful. And I think my oncology experience has really put us in a good position to work there. However, I don't think it's essential, because you need to know the fundamentals. You need to know about how to really care for a patient, how to really look at the whole situation holistically, how to consider like the relatives that you're involved with, the friends, the families, and also about supporting your colleagues and things. So I think as long as you've got the right approach to nursing, when I say right, I mean right for that area, as in you're happy to take your time, slow down, really get to know the patient, then I think as long as you've got that in you, or you've had experience of that, then you should absolutely flourish in the hospice. You don't necessarily need that, but I feel for me it has been helpful, because I had those lovely experiences whilst I worked in oncology that led us to the hospice. I had a patient that I looked after, and it was actually the reason that led us to the hospice. I looked after this lady, and she had a young daughter, and she actually got married on the ward.
Oh,
And it was one of the most memorable days that I had there.
you've given me
We
goosebumps.
we decorated the room off the ward with like all sheets and things, and I remember I was nurse in charge the day that she got married, and I remember putting one of my friends, who one of the nurses, to look after this lady, because I was like, you've always got really nice hair, go and sort her out, go and do her makeup, get her looking and feeling fantastic. So we did that, and oh, it was just absolutely, it was amazing. It really, really sticks with us, and that's kind of why I moved to the hospice as well. But yes, so if and you can do that thing, you can do those sorts of things on any ward. It
Yeah,
doesn't
and
have
I
to be an
think as well,
oncology
like
ward.
nursing, it's so broad, and no one would ever have said to, your friend that was doing her hair and makeup, you're now going to be a hairstylist for someone's wedding. You would,
Yeah.
that's not anything that would ever be possible. But you were all in that amazing position to be able to
Mhm.
facilitate that, and
Mhm.
that's amazing that you and your ward did that.
It was a real, real special time, and the lady, she did die with us, and the husband actually wrote me a letter and a card, and but sent it. I think it was about 2 years later.
Oh,
I actually received it when I had moved back to Newcastle. This letter, and it was just saying about how special we had made that day and things like that. And that was like 2 years later. That's what I actually like. That's what I say to a lot of the staff that I work with now. The smallest thing can make the biggest impact,
mm.
and you just have to remember that. And people remember the strangest of things. So just hold on to that.
While you've been at the hospice back in Newcastle, you've done an end of life care module. How did you find going back to university, and how did you find doing that course after all your kind of extensive end of life experience in clinical practice?
Yeah, so I went to this, and I must admit, when I went, I thought that it would be easier than I first anticipated. But actually, it made us realise that my knowledge of palliative care was very limited. I can look after patients, I can treat them well, but in terms of symptoms and medication and things like that, my knowledge was pretty limited, because we were really fortunate in the hospital that we had palliative care nurses that would come round and advise things. So I was really keen to kind of expand my knowledge and things when I got there. So I signed up for this end of life care for all course, and to see if that would increase my confidence, because I went in as a band 6, so I was feeling pretty confident as a manager, as a leader, but maybe not as a palliative care nurse. And that's what I felt like I needed as well, because a lot of the nurses had been there so many years. They
Yes.
had been there since it had opened. They had a wealth of knowledge, and here's me, fresh out of school pretty much.
Popping down
And
to go, hello, I'm in charge.
yeah, I'm your manager now.
Yeah.
So I was like, I need to back this up with some knowledge. So yeah, signed up for this course, and really lucky to get on it. It was at Northumbria Uni. It was it was pretty funny to go. It was daunting to go back, I must admit, but it was nice. It was good to get back into that kind of the swing of things, and it was a real good experience in terms of it actually made us realise that I knew more than I thought I did. And that's always a good thing, isn't it? A little refresher of, I've got this. I'm okay.
I think reflective practice is so embedded, isn't it, in what we do? And I think maybe we over reflect sometimes and we over doubt ourselves.
Yeah, I think we're very critical, aren't we?
Very
But you
critical.
but it's probably because you've met so many different people, haven't you? You meet so many different nurses who've got such different experiences. So you're bound to compare yourself to other people, and that's not always a good thing,
And I
you
think I
know.
found, especially I look really young. I'm 28, but I got a deed to buy a potato peeler last week. I started at Middlesex, and I went into a meeting, and one of the lecturers said, "Oh no, students aren't allowed in here. It's for members of staff." And I was like, "Oh no, I am a member of staff." She went, "No, you're not." And I had to get out my
Wow.
ID badge from my pocket and be like, "Look, I am a member of staff." And I remember being really embarrassed. Then got to go in front of a class and say to people that, especially in my lots of my cohorts, they're mature students, they're a bit
Hmm.
older, they've got children, it's their second or third career. I think
Yeah.
I think we can overdoubt, and actually we need to just have that confidence of anyone in any
Hmm.
other job.
I know exactly what you mean, Laura, because I'm only 30 as well. So it's just like I look at myself and I always say, God, I'm just a child. I
Yeah.
can't even like how am I managing a ward and things?
And also, when you
And when you
qualified, imagine when, like, I think this, if you told 21-year-old Laura that I would have done everything I've done, I'd be in my current job, I would never, ever
Mm,
have believed you, ever. And I think when your career kind of goes outside your expectations, it's almost like you've never
mhm,
thought about that your career would be where it is. And I think that kind of feeds into that whole, I hate the phrase, but it does feed into the imposter syndrome
mhm,
kind of thing, maybe. Yeah, and I found, as you said, like going back to and doing courses has then increased my confidence. And I think as well
yeah,
within your team, they know that you've done that learning. They know that you've been to university. I mean, I
mhm,
found a lot of people will say, "Oh, what did you learn in this?" Or, and it kind of puts you then more in a position where people are coming to you asking things they
yeah.
might not have done otherwise.
Like with the course, it like I said, it definitely made us realise that I knew more than I thought that I did. But I would have probably liked a little bit more from it if I'm honest. I think it would be a fantastic course if you were wanting to get into palliative care. So, you were asking earlier about if you should work in oncology or where you could potentially work to get into the hospice. It doesn't matter where you work, but if you get an opportunity where you can do a course like end of life care for all or something in that kind of area, then I would definitely recommend it.
So, if you had any advice for anyone that wants to work in oncology or that wants to move into the hospice environment, or working in a hospice, what advice have you got for qualified nurses?
Definitely do it. I would say for oncology, I would highly, highly recommend that. It's such a good experience. Like I was saying earlier, you've got that real acute setting where the patients are really sick. So you've got to think on your feet. It's an exciting environment at times.
Do you think oncology is a good newly qualified area?
I feel like that having the basics beforehand is definitely going to put you in a good position. I personally would say is don't specialize too soon. Get those basics done, learn your fundamentals of how to really look after a patient, and then go into specialize potentially in oncology or wherever else you kind of want to go. Be definitely trying out what you're interested in. But oncology is just a fantastic speciality because you've got that excitement of patients being critically unwell, but you've got that fantastic, fantastic job satisfaction of looking after that patient at the end of life potentially, or getting them home off a fast track. If you can kind of make somebody feel a little bit better whilst they're going through that experience, that's what we went into nursing for. And then the hospice, they are different. They are very different. The hospice is a much slower pace. So I would say if you're interested in the hospice, very different to working in a hospital environment. So I think if you were to go to a hospice and think you maybe just want to stay there for a couple of years, it'll be such a contrast to then go back to the
Go back.
hospital. When I first started, I was thinking, oh my God, it's just so slow. It's just really slow. But you just focus on different things. I remember when I started as well, and the nurses would talk about the patients and their husband and their two kids. and they would talk about them as if they knew them as a whole.
Yeah,
It's like they were their
family.
friends, and that,
Yeah.
and they would know so much about the kids and where they went to school and about their dog and about all this. And I would think, oh my God, like I would have absolutely no idea about that. But now when you get into the kind of way of the hospice, you do know all those things. And it's so lovely to look after a whole family, not just that one individual person in that hospital bed, in that hospital gown. And it's a real different experience.
So where do you see your career going now?
So I have just recently started my 12-month secondment as a band 7 ward manager. So I started that in
Congratulations.
September. Thank you. But actually I will be going on maternity leave in May.
Well, double congratulations.
Yeah, so that'll be me for at least the next year. And then after that, I really, really, I'm not sure. And when I worked in oncology, I had this real set thing of what I wanted to do. And now I think I'm just going to see where the path takes us. I'll be going back to the hospice, and I may be back as a band 7, or I might be back as a band 6. And I think I'll just really try and encourage the new staff there and the band 5s there to kind of develop and things. That's something I really, really enjoy. I love to kind of work with new nurses and boost their confidence and get them to potentially a more senior role, because I think if I didn't have staff who really pushed me and really guided and molded me, then I wouldn't be in the position that I am now. So I think, if anything, I don't know where my path's going to go, but I definitely want to be involved in kind of helping newer nurses to potentially do, I was going to say as well as I have done, but I do feel very proud of myself.
No, of course. Thank you so much for joining me today, Lucy. It was a pleasure to meet
Thank
you.
you for having me.
Oh, and thank you to Sarah.
Sarah is one of the best nurses that I've worked with, genuinely. Thank you very much, Laura.
Thank you.